Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Kof Bet. Amar Rav, Moshe Rabbeinu Kohen Gadol, v'cholek bekodshe shamayim haya, shenemar, me'el hamiluim leMoshe haya lemana. Beforehand, we were discussing the Shivat Yemei HaMiluim, and then Bayom Shemini, when Nadav and Avihu died, and Aharon and his sons became Onenim. And so related to that context, Rav gives a proposal that Moshe Rabbeinu was a Kohen Gadol, and he was able to receive a portion in even Kodshe Shamayim and eat them. How do you know? Because in Vayikra chapter 8, which is talking about the Shivat Yemei HaMiluim, it says that Moshe took a portion, Haya Lemana, from the ram of Miluim. This ram that was brought, a special korban for the consecration of the Mishkan, technically, it was a shelamim, and for most of the time, shelamim anybody could eat. But this shelamim had particular laws, like Kodesh Kodashim. It had to be eaten in the courtyard only by Kohanim. And yet, Moshe is able to eat it. So Rav says this shows that Moshe himself was a Kohen Gadol. Okay, there you go. He did a lot of things in the Mishkan in those first few days, so he must be a Kohen Gadol. That is Rav's hypothesis, and we are going to challenge it a number of times from various sources. First challenge, Me'tibe. Halo Pinchas haya imahen, v'im ita, lema v'halo Moshe Rabbeinu haya imahen. Before, on the previous daf, we said that we wondered, why did Aharon burn the Korban Chatat? And if you say it was because he's an Onen, and an Onen cannot eat it, and also his sons, remaining alive sons, were also onanim, so they cannot eat it either, so therefore nobody could eat it. That's why they had to burn it. That was the opinion of Rabbi Nechunya. Against that, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say, no, that doesn't make sense. Pinchas was there. He was already born, and therefore he would be a Kohen, and he could eat it. So we had to deal with that question. Now, here's the challenge against Rav. If Moshe was a Kohen Gadol, then why didn't Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon ask a question and say, Moshe Rabbeinu was there. Moshe was not an Onen. Nadav and Avihu were Moshe's nephews. That is not directly related, so Moshe could have eaten it. Why did they only ask a question about Pinchas and had to give an answer about Pinchas? Why didn't they ask about Moshe? So doesn't that show that, from the fact that they didn't ask in that baraita about Moshe, doesn't that show that Moshe was not a Kohen? And the answer is, Dilma, Shane Moshe detirid b'shechina damarmor, Moshe b'hashkama ala b'hashkama yarad. Rav can answer, indeed, Moshe is Kohen Gadol, and if he was around, you're right, it would have been appropriate to ask, why they burn it? They should have given it to Moshe. But perhaps Moshe, although he's a Kohen, he was involved, preoccupied with Shekhinah. As it says in a different statement, teaches that Moshe, this is in Masechet Shabbat, teaches that Moshe would go up early in the morning when he got prophecy at Har Sinai, and he would come back also in the morning, meaning he was up there all day receiving prophecy. And therefore here also, perhaps Moshe was receiving prophecy, and so he was not around. And that's why they didn't ask. But in fact, if he was around, he is a Kohen. So that's the answer to that question. Me'tibe, another challenge against Rav. Lechem Elohab mikotshei kodashim umina kodashim yochel. Im nemru kotshei kodashim, lama ne'emar kodashim kalim. Vim nemru kodashim kalim, lama nemru kotshei kodashim. There's a long baraita. The question will be from the middle of it. But the baraita quotes a pasuk from Vayikra that's talking about a Kohen who has a blemish. And it says he can eat, even though he has a blemish, he can eat Kodshe Kodashim and from Kodashim, meaning from just Kodashim Kalim. Now the Braita wonders, if you tell me that a Kohen that has a mum can eat Kodshe Kodashim, why do you have to tell me Kodashim Kalim? And if you tell me he can eat Kodashim Kalim, why do you have to tell me Kodshe Kodashim? Why do you have to tell me both? Couldn't I figure out one from the other? And the answer is, Ilu lo ne'emar kodashim kalim, hayiti omer kodshe kodashim hu deochel sharehu tulu lezar velahen. kodashim kalim lo yochel. If the pasuk only said that, if the pasuk did not say, teach me that a kohen with a mum can eat kodashim kalim, and only said kodshe kodashim, I would say, oh, you know why a kohen with a mum can eat kodshe kodashim? Because it was permitted to a non-priest and also to priests. Now, where do we see ever that kodshe kodashim was permitted to a non-kohen? We're going to propose, must be talking about Moshe. He's a non-Kohen, and yet, in this time, he was able to eat Kodshe Kodashim. So that's going to be the challenge from this line. But anyway, let's finish the Baraita first. So I would think maybe only Kodshe Kodashim, since it once was made an exception that a non-Kohen could eat it, therefore even a Kohen with a blemish can eat it. But Kodshe Kalim, Kadashim Kalim, where there was never was there made an exception for a non-Kohen to eat it, so maybe a Kohen with a mum cannot eat it. So that's why I need the pasuk to say kadashim kalim. Ve'ilu lo ne'emru kodshe kodashim, and if the pasuk did not say kodshe kodashim but only kodashim kalim, hayiti omer bekodashim kalim yehe ochel shehen kalim bekodshe kodashim lo yehe ochel. I would think that regarding kodashim kalim, a Kohen with a mum can eat it because they're more lenient, but kodshe kodashim, which are more stringent, he cannot eat. And that's why I needed to say, Lekach ne'emru kodshe kodashim, Lekach ne'emar kodashim kalim. That's why it says kodshe kodashim, and that's why it says kodashim kalim. End of Baraita. Here's the question. Katani miha, shehare hutru lezar velahen. Lav Moshe, over here, in the beginning of it, it said that kodshe kodashim were permitted to a non-kohen and also to kohanim. Who is this non-kohen who was able to eat kodshe kodashim? Do we find any other example? Is it not Moshe? And therefore, you see, Moshe, this was a special exception. Although Moshe is not a kohen, he was able to eat this kodesh kodashim temporarily for a special thing for the inauguration of the Mishkan. But he was not actually a kohen. Challenged against Rav. Amar Rav Sheshat la bebama lezar uchtivra omer yesh mincha bebama. Rav Sheshat says no. When this baraita makes reference to a non-kohen who eats kodshe kodashim, it's not talking about Moshe. It's talking about the time of bamot, when it was permitted for people to make their own altars in their backyards. They were able to bring, number one, kodashim kalim, yes, and that anybody could eat, so that's okay. And although they did not bring animals that were kodshe kodashim on the bamot, there were rules about bamot. You can't just do anything you want. So they did not bring kodshe kodashim with as a zar. However, there is an opinion that they were allowed to bring korban mincha on the bama. Now on the bama, non-kohanim serve. So you hear korban mincha is a type of kodshe kodashim. When it's in the Beit HaMikdash, only kohanim can eat the korban mincha. And yet, according to one opinion, they were permitted on the bamot, so you have non-kohanim eating korban mincha, which is kodesh kodashim. That's what the Baraita was talking about. It's not talking about Moshe. You know why Moshe ate that kodesh kodashim? Because he was a kohen. Rav can answer all that. Okay, so another challenge against Rav. Metibe. Miriam mi hiskira. Im tomar Moshe hiskira Moshe zarhu. Ven zar ro'eh et hanegaim. A Baraita wonders who declared that Miriam is a Mesorah and put her away, quarantined her. You need a Kohen to examine the skin disease and to say, this is Sarat. Now, who did it? Did Moshe do it? Moshe is not a Kohen. This is going to be the source of the question right here. And a non-Kohen, even if you're the greatest expert in halakha, as great as even if you are Moshe Rabbeinu himself, still, he's not a Kohen, so he cannot officially declare something to be Sarat. Vim tormad Aaron hiskira. Aaron karobhu ve'en karobro et negaim. Is it Aaron? But he's a relative, and a Kohen who's a relative cannot examine Kohanim, and that would be true for Elazar and Itamar. They would also be relatives, so they cannot be the ones to examine it. Ela kavod gadol halak la kadosh baruch hu leMiriam ota sha'a. Ani Kohen ve'ani maskira. Ani cholta ve'ani potra. Rather, It must be HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself was the one who declared it to be sarat, which was a great honor. Now, it's a funny to be a great honor that Hashem should come and say, you have sarat. But nevertheless, it is still an honor, even though it's a negative thing, that Hashem should come bichbodo v'atzmo and give her this honor to Miriam at that time. Because Hashem said, I am a Kohen. We have a chidush here, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a Kohen. And I can declare whether she should be put away for further examination. We have to see. Go away for a week, and then we'll examine it again, and then we'll decide. And then when after a week, they decide chota, she's definitely sarat, or potra, that she's now no longer a mesora. So in this baraita, Hashem had to be the one to declare her impure because Moshe couldn't. Anyway, Moshe is a relative, but besides being a relative, here it says he is not a Kohen. Challenge against Rav, who said that Moshe is a Kohen. Katani mihat Moshe zar ve'en zar ro'eh et negaim. So Rav, how are you going to explain this baraita that says Moshe is not a Kohen? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak shane marot negaim daharon ubanav ketubim b'parasha. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says that examining of leprous marks, that's a special law where the pasuk says only Aharon and his sons can examine it. Therefore, although Moshe was a Kohen, he's a Kohen in general for other laws, but when it comes to sarat, this is a subcategory. Not all Kohanim can examine sarat, only Aharon and his sons. So we can still maintain that Moshe was a Kohen when it came to korbanot. Another challenge against Rav. Chamesh semachot taita Elisheva yetera al benot Israel. Elisheva, she's the daughter of Aminadav, and she married Aharon. And on that day of the consecration of the Mishkan, on the 8th day, she was happier than all the other daughters of Israel. She had 5 reasons to be happy. Yevamah Melech, her brother-in-law, that's Moshe, she married Aharon. So her brother-in-law, Moshe, is a king. This is an interesting chidush, that Moshe is a king. We don't find in Torah that he's called a king. The Gemara is going to discuss that further in a minute. Isha Kohen Gadol, her husband Aharon is the Kohen Gadol. Bena Segan Elazar, her son, was the deputy high priest. Ben Mashor Milchama, her grandson Pinchas was the Kohen who's anointed for war. Ve'achiyah Nesi Shevet, and her Ve'achiha, her brother, that's Nachshon ben Aminadav, who came on that day. He's on the 8th day, which is also Rosh Chodesh of Nisan. He's the one that gave the gift offering on that day, and so that's her brother who is a Nasi. So she had 5 reasons to be happy. Va'abela al shene baneh hayet. Although she had 5 reasons to be happy, she also had a big reason to be sad, which her 2 sons, it's Aharon's sons with her, died, Nadav and Avihu. Okay, that's the Braita. What's the point of bringing this Braita? Katani mihat yevamaha melech, melechin kohen gadol la. Since it says that Moshe was a king, doesn't that mean that Moshe was a king, but not a kohen gadol? Right, so that's a challenge against Rav. We answer, ma af melech. Maybe it means that her brother-in-law, Moshe, was also a king. Maybe he was a Kohen Gadol and also a king. Okay, finally we say ketana'eh. Although we answered all of these questions, but you see, a lot of the answers were quite forced. And so, in the end, we say, actually, it's a machloket Tanaim. Rav is following one opinion, and all these other baraitot, we can explain them more easily, that they're following another Tanaitic opinion that say that Moshe was not a Kohen. Here's the Braita that's actually going to give 3 different opinions. Vayichad af Hashem be Moshe. When Hashem appeared to Moshe at the burning bush and told him, go, and to Paro, and tell him, let my people go. And Moshe says, no, send someone else. Who am I can't go. Moshe, okay, we understood once or twice, he could say, I'm not sure about this, but Moshe kept persisting, and until Hashem actually got angry at Moshe, and as the pasuk says. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha Omer, Kol Charon af shebatorah ne'emar bo roshem, v'zeh lo ne'emar bo roshem. Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha says that every time it says in the Torah that Hashem gets angry, there's always a consequence that happens right after. However, over here, although it says Hashem got angry against Moshe, we don't see any consequence, no punishment or anything that we can see as a result of this anger. That's his question. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omer, Av ze ne'emar boroshem, shene'emar, halo achicha, Aharon achicha halevi, v'alo kohen hu, achika amar, ani amarti ata kohen vehu levi, achshav hu kohen ve'ata levi. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, actually, Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha, there is a consequence here, and that is that Hashem tells Moshe, after Moshe says, I can't go, and Hashem gets angry, then it says, behold, Aharon, your brother, the Levi. Now, why is it called Aharon a Levi? Isn't Aharon the Kohen? I mean, Kohen or Kohanim are within Leviim, but if someone's, nowadays, if someone is a Kohen, you don't call him a Levi, although Kohanim come from Leviim, but you give him the higher designation of being a Kohen. So why did Hashem call Aharon a Levi? This is what he was saying. Hashem says, I thought to myself that my plan was that you, Moshe, will be a Kohen and Aharon will be a Levi. But now that you refused and made me angry, as a punishment, he is going to be a Kohen, Aharon, and you, Moshe, will be only a Levi and not a Kohen. So we see, according to this opinion of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, that Moshe, although he could have been a Kohen if he had agreed to the mission without making Hashem angry, but he didn't, and therefore he never became a Kohen. So that's an opinion that says Moshe was not a Kohen. V'chachamim omrim lo nitken Moshe ela shivat yemei miluim bilvad. Chachamim say that Moshe was a Kohen, but only temporarily, only for those 7 days of miluim, but otherwise he was not a Kohen. V'yesh omerim lo paska kehuna ela mizaro shel Moshe shene'emar Moshe ish Elohim banav yikareu al shevet halevi ve'omer Moshe v'Aaron bekohanav u'Shmuel bekorei shemo. And yesh omrim, this is the opinion that Rav is following, says that Moshe was a Kohen. The thing is that the kehuna did not continue in Moshe's descendants. Lo paska kehuna ela mizaro shel Moshe, that the priesthood expired only for the descendants of Moshe. But Moshe himself, he was a Kohen his entire life. How do you know that? Because there's a pasuk in Zevaḥim that says Moshe, the man of God, his sons were called upon, or were called within the tribe of Levi. So that sounds like his sons were Levi, but Moshe himself was a Kohen. And if that's not good enough proof, there's another pasuk in Tehillim that says Moshe and Aharon are among Hashem's Kohanim, and Shmuel called upon Hashem. So there you go. It says explicitly Moshe was a Kohen, and in Zevaḥim we see that his sons were not Kohanim. We wonder, Mai ve'omer, why need the extra pasuk in Tehillim? Can't you figure it out just from the pasuk in Zevaḥim? Since it says that your sons are Leviim, we can infer that Moshe was a Kohen. No, you might say that the pasuk in Zevaḥim is not dealing with Moshe at all. It's just letting you know, from his sons were Leviim. But maybe Moshe also was a Levi, but it wasn't dealing with Moshe. So in case you want to argue that, and the inference that you made is not good, therefore, we bring another pasuk from Tehillim, which clearly states that Moshe was a Kohen. So what more do you need than this pasuk? Then this is Moshe ve'Aaron bekohanav. And maybe this was the basis of Rav's opinion all along. But in any case, we see that Rav had a Tanaitic source of the Yesh Omrim, and the other Baraitot that we saw, where it was difficult to argue that Moshe was a Kohen, that could be following the first opinion here. V'chol charon af shebatorah nemar boroshem. And now we're going to ask about this thesis that we mentioned here, that Rabbi Yoshua ben Korcha says, in every other case, when Hashem gets angry, there is a consequence. Was that true? Sounds like not only when Hashem gets angry, even when a person gets angry, there's going to be a consequence. But here we see that Moshe left from Paro, the last time he spoke to him, with anger. But it doesn't say anything else. He just got angry and left. It doesn't seem that there was a consequence. Maybe say the plague that came after was a consequence, but that's not directly from Moshe's anger. Amar Resh Lakish, setaro v'yasa. Resh Lakish says, in fact, although it doesn't say so in the Torah, it must be that Moshe slapped him and left. Moshe said, in anger, right, and slapped him, Paro, and he was able to get out of there, even alive. Mi amar Resh Lakish achi. Now we ask, are you sure Resh Lakish said that Moshe slapped Paro on the face? However, there's another statement regarding this pasuk when Hashem says, go in the morning to Paro and stand by the river bank to meet him. Ve'amar Resh Lakish melechu ve'asber lo panim. Resh Lakish said, why does it say v'nisabta? You should stand up tall to greet him, meaning greet him with respectfully. Resh Lakish explains because Hashem is telling Moshe, even though Paro is evil, and even though he is enslaving the people and doing all terrible things, nevertheless, he is a king, and therefore you should show respect to him. Even an evil king, you show respect to. Rabbi Yochanan amar, Rashahu ve'a'ez panecha bo. But Rabbi Yochanan said, no, he's an evil king, and you can be insolent towards him. So that's a machloket. Anyway, Resh Lakish says here that you should show respect to a king, even an evil king like Paro. So how could it be that Resh Lakish said that Moshe slapped him on the way out? Doesn't make sense. So the answer is epur. Switch around the opinions of Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan is the one that said that Hashem told Moshe, be respectful to Paro, and Resh Lakish is the one that said, no, you could be insolent to him. So that makes sense. Resh Lakish is the one that said that Moshe slapped Paro. Amar Rabbi Yanai, L'olam temat malchut alecha, tichtiv v'yaredu chol abadecha ele elai, v'ilu ledideh la ka'amar le. Rabbi Yanai, now we're furthering on this theme, that the fear of kingship should always be upon you, even when it's an evil king. As it says again in Shemot, that Moshe told Paro, all these your servants shall come unto me and bow to me, saying, please get out. And all the people that follow you, and after that I will go out. Notice it says that your servants are going to come and bow and come down to me and bow to me. But Moshe did not say you are going to come and bow to me and beg me to leave, which is actually what happens, that Paro is the one that comes and has to be disheveled and say, please Moshe, right, we need your help, go get out so we can stop this plague. So how come Moshe did not say, you're going to bow down to me? Because even though Moshe was giving Paro an ultimatum and the Paro was being so evil, nevertheless, as a king, you show some degree of respect for that position, according to the Bianai. Rabbi Yochanan amar mehacha v'yad Hashem hayta el Eliyahu v'yishanes motnav v'yaros lifnei Achab. Rabbi Yochanan says, I have a different proof for the same concept, and that is that the pasuk says in Melachim that the hand of Hashem was on Eliyahu, and he girded up his loins and he ran before Achab to the entrance of Israel. Now Achab was very evil king, and yet Eliyahu ran out of respect in front of to accompany him while he was on the way. And so that shows that you show respect even to an evil king. By the way, this Rabbi Yochanan shows that you should switch these around, because Rabbi Yochanan in this version said that if he's a Rasha, you should be insolent towards him. So, and we said switch it around, which makes sense. Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says you should be respectful over here also. Amar Ula, Bikesh Moshe Malchut, Velo Natnu Lo, Dichtiv, Al Tikrab Halom, Ve'en Halom Ela Malchut, Shenemar, Mi Anochi Hashem Elokim, Ki Hebi Otani Ad Halom. Now, in the Braita above, we mentioned that Moshe was a king. So back to that theme, Ula says, Moshe wanted to be king, however Hashem said no. Where does Hashem say no? At the burning bush, when Hashem says, do not come halom. Now, simply that means do not come here. Do not come too close. Take your shoes off. It's a holy place. However, the Midrash says the word halom means kingship. And so Hashem is saying, al tikrav, don't come near kingship. Now, where do you see that halom means kingship? As Pasuk says regarding David HaMelech, when Natan HaNavi came and God told him good news, you're going to have success. So David, in his humility, said, who am I that Hashem should give me this good thing that you have brought me hither? So in the simple reading, David is saying, who am I and what is my house that you should bring me here to this good thing that I have? But the thing that he was promised was in fact the dynasty, and therefore you see in the context, halom means kingship, and therefore when Moshe says, al tikrav halom, when Hashem tells Moshe, you shall not have halom, what he means is, I know Moshe, you're asking to be a king, but no, I'm not giving you kingship. Mativ Rava, Rabbi Ishmael Omer, Yevamah Melech. Rava challenges Ula's statement from the Braita that we saw above, where Rabbi Ishmael says that Elisheva's brother-in-law was a king. Moshe was a king. So here you just said that Moshe was denied being a king, and that over there it says Moshe was a king. Amar Rava lo uzaro ka'amar. No, when Moshe was asking for at the burning bush was that not only he should be a king, but his descendants should be a king. That's what Hashem said no to. So therefore, see the word halom, means to have a dynasty of kingship after you. So yes, Moshe himself was a king, but it only lasted his own generation and did not continue to his children. Now we ask, is that true? That when it says the word halom, it means also kingship for generations? Hu in zar'o la. But we see regarding Shaul, when they came to anoint Shaul, and they did a lottery, but they couldn't find Shaul because he was hiding, and they asked of Hashem, is there yet a man who comes hither? Is there anybody else over here? Literally is what it means. But if we say halom means that we're looking for not only someone who would be king, but also his descendants will be king. Well, it doesn't fit with Shaul, because Shaul was king, but his descendants were not king. So here we see the word halom is referring to someone who does not have a dynasty. So one answer is actually the kingship did go to Shaul's son Ishboshet. He was the king for a couple of years before King David actually came and took over. So technically, he did have a dynasty. Or you could say, no, Shaul's different because he himself did not remain a king his whole life. He should have. In other words, when Shaul was appointed to be king, the promise was that it would go to him and his descendants after him. But because Shaul messed up, so then it was taken away from him. So that's why it did not even remain in himself, and that's why it didn't go on to his descendants. בשעה שפוסקים גדולה לאדם, פוסקים לו וזרעו עד סוף כל הדורות. And this fits the opinion of Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Chanina, that when greatness is given to a person from heaven, it's given to him and his descendants for all generations. So by default, it will go to future generations. And you know that from Pasuk in the Yov. That teaches, Shenemar, Lo yigra misadik einav vet melachim lakise vegomer. He withdraws not his eyes from the righteous, but with the kings upon the throne, he sets them forever, and they are exalted. However, ve'im hegista ato, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashpilo, shenemar, ve'im asurim bazikim yilachdun behable oni. If that person who gets honor becomes arrogant, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring him down, as the next pasuk says, and if they bound him in fetters and be held in cords of affliction. And that's what happened to Shaul. He was supposed to be king forever, but because he messed up, that's why it was taken away from him. But indeed, the word halom in that context also means for future generations. Moving on to the next part of the Mishnah that teaches Ba'aleh Mumin, Ben Ba'aleh Mumin Vechule, a Kohen who has a blemish, whether it's a temporary blemish or a permanent blemish, he gets a portion of Kodshei Kodashim and he can eat them, although he cannot perform a sacrifice. Menahane Mileh, what's the source that he can eat them and even get a portion of them? De Tanur Banan, Kol Zachar Lirabot Ba'aleh Mumin. It's from Pasuk that says Kol Zachar. The phrase Kol Zachar actually appears 3 times to say that male Kohanim can eat certain things, once regarding a Korban Mincha, and then a Nasham, and a Chatat. So we're going to analyze actually all 3 of them. So regarding the first one that's said regarding a Korban Mincha, why does it say Kol Zachar? The word Kol is coming to be inclusive, to include even someone who has a mu'um. Now, lemai, that he's included for what? What can he do? A different pasuk later in Vayikra already says that the bread of God, the most sacred, Kodshei Kodashim, the Kohen who has a blemish, that's the context of that pasuk, can eat. So I have an explicit pasuk that a mu'um Kohen can eat. Ela lachaluka. So this word, Kol Zachar, is coming to include something else, and that is that they get a share along with the other Kohanim. That's one baraita. Tanya idach, another baraita, says, Kol Zachar lerabot ba'aleh mumin, quoting the one about Hatat offering, and it says also, all males, and that comes to include someone who has a blemish. Lemai. If it's coming to teach us that a Kohen who has a mum can eat, we already proved that. We already know that from the pasuk in Vayikra 21. And if it's to tell me that he gets a portion, I already know that from the previous one that said kol zachar. Sheyachol, so rather it's just coming to teach me something else. What is that? Sheyachol en li ela tam v'na'asa ba'amum eikaro minayin. I might think that only if the Kohen was originally fine, and then he got a mum later on in life, then he can eat. But maybe if he was born with a mum, then he cannot eat. Maybe that's worse. Talmud Omar kol zachar, therefore comes to include also, even if he's born with a mum, nevertheless he can eat and get a portion. Tanya Idach. Now a third one that says kol zachar rabot ba'al mum. It says kol zachar also regarding korban asham. Why does it say that? That's coming to include someone who has a mum. Lemai. Include for what law? If it's to teach us that he can eat, we know that already from Pasuk in Vayikra 21. If it's for getting a portion, we know that from the first kol zachar that we said. If it's that even if he's born with a mum, also we know that from the one that we just set up here. So rather, what is this kol zachar coming to teach? Sheyachol en li ela ba'amum kavua, ba'amum over minayin, Talmud Omar kol zachar. I might think only if he has a permanent blemish, then he can get a portion and eat kodashim. But if it's a temporary one, how do you know? That's why I need the last one, kol zachar. Now we ask about this. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Having a permanent blemish, isn't that worse than having a temporary blemish? So two answers. Amar Rav Sheshet epuch. Rav Sheshet says, you know what? In fact, switch it around. And the Braita should read, I might think only a temporary blemish. What if he has a permanent blemish, which is worse? How do you know he can eat? That's what the third one is coming to teach. That's one answer. Rav Ashi amar leolam la tepoch. No, leave it as it is. V'yisterich salka datech amina ki tameh. Ma tameh kama de lo tahor lo achil af hainameh kama de la mitkan la achil kamash malan. I might think that a blemish is like being tameh. Just like someone who's tameh, since being tameh is a temporary condition, you can always become tahor. So as long as you don't become tahor, you can't eat. So I might think that a blemish also, if it's permanent, well then you can't do anything about it. Okay, so that's easier to justify a permanent blemish that you can eat, because you can wait your whole life, but you won't be able to get rid of it. But I might have thought that a temporary blemish, well, since if you just wait, the blemish will go away. So then don't eat now. You wait till it goes away, like tumah. So I might have thought that as long as since it's temporary, as long as it has not been fixed, you cannot eat. So that's why the third kol zachar comes to teach that even a temporary blemish. And in fact, in this sense, the temporary blemish is a bigger chidush than the permanent blemish. Next, we go to the next part of the Mishnah that says, Kol she'eno ra'ui vechule. Let's look back at the Mishnah, at the full sentence. Kol she'eno ra'ui la'avoda, eno cholek ba'basar. If someone is not fit for service, then he does not get a portion. Seems to refer to a Kohen who is tameh. He's tameh, so he cannot do the service, and therefore he also does not get a portion, and certainly cannot eat it. Let's analyze. Velo v'hare ba'amum de lo ra'ui la'avoda ve'cholek. The Mishnah, even if it's talking about a tameh, but it says it as a general statement, so it refers to anyone who cannot do avodah, does not get a portion. But that's not true, because a Kohen who has a blemish cannot serve the avodah, and yet he does get a portion. So that's a counterexample. Vetu ha'ra'ui la'avodah cholek. Furthermore, there's another problem, which is we can make an inference from this language of the Mishnah, that since the Mishnah says if he cannot serve, he does not get a portion, so we should then infer that if he can serve, he does get a portion. Now, this is not a logically necessary inference, but it seems it would be so, and then we're going to reject this inference. But assuming that is true, we have a problem, because when the majority of the community is tameh, then the Kohen is allowed to serve. Even when the Kohen is tameh, he can serve, and yet, although he can serve and bring that korban sibur as a communal offering, still he does not get a portion and does not eat it. So here we have a counterexample of the inference. So therefore, we have a counterexample of the rule itself in the Mishnah and a counterexample of the inference that we derive from it. So we have two problems, and we can answer both with one restatement of the Mishnah. Ra'ui la'achila ka'amar. Don't say whoever is fit to serve gets a portion, but rather whoever is fit to eat gets a portion. And that would solve both of these problems, because a Ba'al Mum can eat, so he gets a portion. So that's totally fine. Whereas someone who's Tameh cannot eat and does not get a portion. That also works well. And the person and if the majority is Tameh and he's making a communal offering, he can serve, but he cannot eat and also does not get a portion. So this works out for everyone. But now we have another counter example. A minor Kohen, he can eat. Minor Kohen, he doesn't get his own portion, but he can eat. So this is a problem, and it goes against the inference, because the inference was anyone who can eat gets a portion. That's in the reworking of it. But a katan can eat but does not get a portion. Ha la katane. You know what? The inference is not actually said in the Mishnah. It's not logically necessary. So forget the inference. You're right. The inference, even if whether you say hara ra'ui la'avodah cholek or hara ra'ui la'achila cholek, there's counterexamples to both. So you know what? Erase the inference. It's not true. Hashta da'atit lahachi lo'olam kedekamar meikara. Okay, once you remove the problem of the inference, if you erase that problem, well then you know what? You can go back to the original language of the Mishnah, and then we had only one problem. I mishum tameh la katane. If it's a problem of the tameh guy, when everybody is tameh, well that doesn't say that either in the Mishnah. So we'll remove the inference altogether, and then we don't have that problem. And regarding the first question that you asked, that a Kohen who has a mum, he cannot do avodah, yet he gets a portion. That was a special pasuk that we learned about earlier. The special pasuk that someone who has a mum, he gets to get a portion. But that was just an exception, and therefore the rule still stands. When you have a pasuk that specifically says, the pasuk that we quoted above, that someone who has a mum can get a portion. Okay, fine, that's an exception to the rule because of the pasuk. But this rule in the Mishnah is talking about when there's no exceptional pasuk, then that's the rule, and that applies to a Kohen who's tameh. He does not serve, and he does not get a portion. Afilu tameh b'shat zerikat damim v'tor b'shat hekter chalabim eno cholek. The Mishnah taught that even if the Kohen is tameh at the time of sprinkling of the blood, that's during the daytime, they have to sprinkle the blood during the daytime, and he's tahor at the time of the burning of the fats. Well, that would definitely be at night. When, let's say, he went to the mikveh during the day and waited till nighttime, you could burn the fats during the day also. But it's likely that if he was tameh during the day and he went to the mikveh, then he'd be tahor at night. And at night, you can still burn the fats that go on the fats that go on the mizbeach. Then he still cannot get a portion, even though he can say, hey, give me a portion now during the day. I can eat it at night because you're allowed to eat at night. No, he doesn't get it. You have to be tahor both times. Tahor b'shat zedikat damim v'tameh b'shat hekter chalabim cholek. Now we're going to try to make another inference from it. Really, the only logical inference, absolute logical inference from the Mishnah is that, even if you're tameh at the beginning, but not at the end, you don't get. So for sure, if you're tahor the whole time, then you get. But that's the easy case. But we want to make an inference to the opposite case. What if someone was tahor during the day when they're doing the zirika of the blood, but then they became tameh later? And tameh later on, it could be, let's say, it could be during the day still. Let's say they did shechita and they sprinkled the blood at 3 o'clock. And then he became tameh at 4 o'clock. And then they go and they burn the fats at 5 o'clock. And still during the day or at night. So either way, he would get a portion if he was tahor during the blood service. So it sounds like only the blood service is what's important. Is that true? So that is true for the Mishnah, but we say it will not agree with everybody. Matnitin de la ke'Abba Shaul. If you accept this inference, then our Mishnah is not according to the opinion of Abba Shaul the Tanya. Abba Shaul Omer, Le'olam eno ochel ad sheyeh tahor mishat zirika ad shat hekter chalabim. Damar kera, hamakriv et dam hashelamim ve'et hacheleb, da'afilu hekter chalabim nami ba'eh. According to Abba Shaul, one cannot eat the korbanot unless he is tahor all the way through, from the time of from sprinkling of the blood all the way until the burning of the fats, because the pasuk says, and he among the sons of Aaron who sacrificed the blood of the peace offering and the fat. The fat is not part of the blood offering, that's part of the burning things. Only that person shall have the right thigh for a portion. So you see that he has to be tahor the whole way through. That's a Shaul, but that would not be in accordance with the Mishnah if we accept this inference of the Mishnah. Ba'e Rav Asher. Nitma bentayim mahu. Rav Asher asks, what if he became tameh between these times? In other words, he was tahor when they sprinkled the blood. Then he became tameh. But then he became tahor again, let's say at night, and then they did the hekter halavim afterwards. So he's tameh for the sprinkling. He's tahor for the sprinkling of the blood. He's also tahor for at the time when they offered the fats. He was just tameh in the middle. Can he get something according to Abba Shaul? Do we say you need to be tahor at the time of sprinkling the blood and at the time of the burning of the fats? And he was. Or maybe he has to be tahor the entire time, from the sprinkling of the blood all the way until the burning of the fats, and he was not all the way through. Teko, we leave this question standing. Amar Rava, Haidina Merebi Elazar Berebi Shimon Gamirna Damar Bebet Hakise. And now Rava is going to introduce a fun story dialogue in order to explain the laws in the Mishnah. Remember, it said Tevul Yom, Mechusar Kippurim, cannot get a portion. Also, an Onen does not get a portion. They are tameh at the time of the sacrificing during the day, even though they will be tahor later on, still they cannot get a portion. Now, we're going to end up learning this from Pesukim, but we're going to show that potentially you could use logic to derive it, but each logical kavachomer that we're going to introduce has an opposite kavachomer, and that cancels each other out. And so for each of the following cases, we're going to end up saying it's a pasuk. We're going to talk about 3 different cases for 3 different types of korbanot, and then we're going to expand that from the one case of someone tameh to the other cases of mechusar kippurim and the person who is onen. So here we go. Rava says, this law in the Mishnah, that if someone is tameh during the day and he wants to get a portion so he could eat it at night and he's not allowed to, I learned this from Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, who said it in the bathroom. Now, we're going to see later, he didn't literally say it in the bathroom, but he thought about it in the bathroom and then taught it afterwards. Why do you think about it in the bathroom when that's not allowed? Wait till the end of the daf, we'll address that. But first, here's the story. Danta. Ba'tevul yom ve'amar, ten li mimincha ve'ochal. The best way to understand the arguments is that by putting it into a story where you have 2 kohanim. One is a tevul yom. He is tameh now, and he went to the mikveh, but at night he'll become tahor. And he comes to a kohen who is tahor and who is serving in the mikdash and says, give me a portion of the korban mincha. A Yisrael brought a korban mincha, and the kohanim who are serving that day in that family are supposed to split it. The Tvul Yom says, I want a portion too. Now, a law about korban mincha that you have to know is that if a kohen brings a korban mincha, then no kohanim eat it. They only eat a korban mincha that's brought by a Yisrael. Okay, so here's the claim. Amar lo, uma'im b'makom sheyafeh kochacha bechatatcha, dechiticha mechatat Yisrael, makom shehura kochacha b'minchatcha, en odin she'adichacha miminchat Yisrael. So once the Tvul Yom comes and says to the tahor kohen, please give me a portion of the korban mincha, I will eat it at night. The tahor kohen can make a counterclaim with a kal vachomer and say, if in a case where your claim would be stronger, that would be in a chatat claim, because when it comes to a chatat, if you can eat a chatat no matter who brings it, even if a Kohen brings it or a non-Kohen brings it, if you bring your own chatat, you actually get the whole thing, even if it's not your turn to serve. It's not your family clan that's serving in the mikdash on that day. If you bring a korban chatat yourself, any Kohen who brings a korban chatat can get the meat themselves. So in a case where your claim is strong, and yet if it's someone else bringing a korban chatat, a Yisrael, I could push you out and say, sorry, you're Tevul Yom, you don't get it. So if in a case of a korban chatat, where your claim is strong, yet you would not get any portion as a Tevul Yom of a korban chatat, then all the more so for mincha. Makom shehura kochacha, and korban mincha, your power is weak, because if you bring your own korban mincha, you don't get it. So korban chatat, any time of the year, if you bring korban chatat, you will get the meat. But a korban mincha, anytime you bring it, you do not get the extra flour. In fact, no Kohen does. So if I can push you away when your power is strong in a chatat and say, Tevul Yom, you don't get it, all the more so I can push you away regarding a korban mincha that Israel brings and say, sorry, you're not getting a portion. And therefore, the tahor Kohen can push away the tameh Kohen with that kal vachomer. However, the Tevul Yom Kohen has a counter. ומה אם דחיתני מחטאת ישראל, שכשם שיפה כוחי, כך יפה כוחך, תדחני ממנחה, שכשם שהורע כוחי, כך הורע כוחך. The Tameh Kohen says, if you can push me away when it comes to a korban chatat of Israel, where it's true that my claim is bigger, but also your claim is bigger. Maybe you can push me away from a korban chatat when I'm at Tevul Yom, because you have a greater claim that you can eat that korban chatat, whether it's yours or someone else brings it. So that's why you can push me away from a korban chatat. But that cannot apply to a korban mincha, where it's true, my access to a korban mincha is weaker, because if a Kohen brings it, I can't have it. But your access to a korban mincha is also weaker, because you also cannot eat any korban mincha that's brought by a Kohen. So maybe the reason why you can push me away when I'm a Tevul Yom for a chatat is because you have a stronger claim to it, but in the korban mincha, your claim is weaker. So therefore, I should be able to get the portion of a korban mincha that's brought by Yisrael. So now this is a counter kal vachomer. They cancel each other out. So now the tahor Kohen says, okay, I cannot withhold it from you because of the kal vachomer, but now I bring a pasuk. Harehu omer la kohen makriv ota lo tihye bo hakreb ve'echol. It says in the context of a korban mincha that the leftover, after you take the kimitzah, it goes to the kohen who is offering it. He will get it. So the kohen who's tahor says, oh, you want it? Come and sacrifice it, and then you could eat. Oh, you can't sacrifice it because you're tameh right now. Well, then you can't eat it. And but the point of the exercise is to show that the kal vachomer can go so far, but it can be countered. And that's why we need the pasuk to teach me this. Okay, that's all case number one. We're going to do the same exercise 2 more times for other korbanot. Ten li mehatat Israel ve'ochal. The Tevul Yom comes to the kosher Kohen who's serving that day and says, I would like a portion from the korban chatat that the Yisrael brought, which they're supposed to be split among all the Kohanim that are part of that clan of that day. He also is part of the clan of that day, but he's a Tevul Yom. But he says, give me and I'll eat it at night when I'm tahor. אמר לו, ומה במקום שהורע כוחי במנחתי, דחיתיך ממנחת ישראל, מקום שיפה כוחי בחטאתי, אין עודין שעדיכך מחטאת ישראל? So the Tahor Kohen says, if in a case where my claim is weak, and that's in the korban mincha that I bring, if I bring, or any Kohen brings, a korban mincha, I do not get a portion. So even though my claim is weak in a korban mincha, nevertheless, I can push you away for a mincha offering that a Yisrael brings. So if I can do that when my claim is weak, well then in a case where my case is strong, that's if I bring a korban chatat, I get to keep the whole thing, no matter what, even if it's not my family's time that day. So I have a strong claim to that. So in a korban chatat, where my claim is stronger, all the more so, I should have the power to push you out and say, no, you cannot have any portion of the chatat that the Yisrael brings. So therefore, you're out. The Tevul Yom answers back, Amar lo, Umaim shedechitani miminchat Yisrael, shekeshem shura kochacha, kachura kochi. Tedicheni mechatat Yisrael, shekeshem sheyafe kochacha, kach yafe kochi. Tevul Yom says, yeah, you can only push me out when it comes to a minchat Yisrael, where just like my power is weak, so too, just like your power is weak, my power is weak. In other words, the reason why you can push me out for korban mincha, which is what we proved above from the pasuk, maybe the only reason you can push me out for korban mincha is not because your power is weak, but because my power is weak. So that's why you can push me out. My power is weak in that if I would bring korban mincha, I wouldn't get any of it. But that doesn't mean that you can push me out from a chatat of Yisrael, because there, in the category of chatat, my power is stronger. If I bring korban chatat, even if it's not my turn that day, I get the meat. And therefore, in general, for korban chatat of a Yisrael, if it is I am part of that clan, then I should be able to get a portion of it, even though I'm tameh now, but I'll eat it at night. So I have more power, more than for korban mincha. So you should give it to me, and that refutes your kavachomer. Harehu omer, hakohen amchate ota yochelena bo hate ve'echol. And therefore the tahor kohen says, that's why I need another pasuk that said regarding a korban chatat that the kohen who affects atonement, he shall eat it. So the tahor kohen says, I offered it, I get to eat it. You want to offer it? You want to eat it? Okay, come offer it. Oh, you can't offer it because you're Tevul Yom. Sorry, you cannot eat it. So it's based on the pasuk, not on the kal vachomer. Same exercise once more for a shelamim. Amar le, teni mechazeh v'shok ve'ochal. A Tevul Yom comes, he's part of that clan, and says, please give me a part of the shelamim. I'm Tevul Yom now and I can't eat it, but I can eat it tonight or even tomorrow as a korban shelamim when I am pure. The tahor kohen says back, Amar le, Uma b'makom sheyafe kochacha bechatatcha dechiticha mechatat Yisrael. He says, in a situation, the one right above, regarding korban chatat, where you have more power, because if you would bring a korban chatat, were you tahor, even if it wasn't your time, your family day, you would be able to take all the meat. And yet, in the previous case, we just brought the pasuk, I pushed you away from getting any meat from a chatat Yisrael because you're Tevul Yom. All the more so, makom shehura kochacha bishlamim shenecha behen ela chazeh v'shok enodin shadichacha. You have less power regarding a shelamim, because when someone brings a shelamim, you don't get the whole thing. You only get the portions of it, the breast and the thigh. If you brought it when you bring a chatat, the kohen gets all the meat. But a shelamim, he only gets the breast and the thigh, and the rest will go to the owner. And so all the more so, since you have less right over a shelamim, I can more easily push you away and say you get nothing. The Kohen, who's a Tevul Yom, says back, Uma im dechitani mechatat sheken ura kochi etzel nashai va'abadai tedicheni mechazeh v'shok sheken yafe kochi etzel nashai va'abadai. No, you were only able to push me away and refuse a korban chatat meat to me because there I had less power when it comes to my wife and my slaves. Because korban chatat is kodesh kodashim, only male kohanim can eat it. He cannot share it with his wife and slaves. So that's why you pushed me away. But when it comes to shelamim, the breast and the thigh of the shelamim, where I have more rights over it, because I can share it even with my wife's and my household, my slaves. So therefore, I have more of a claim to them. And you should be able, I have a claim that you have to give it to me. So this is a kal vachomer that counters the pure Kohen's kal vachomer. And therefore, the pure Kohen says back, okay, you're right, I don't have that possibility, the kal vachomer, but I have a pasuk. Harei omer lakohen hazorek et dam hashelamim lo yiyeh bo zerok ve'echol. A pasuk says regarding a shelamim that it will belong to the Kohen who sprinkles the blood of the shelamim. He gets those portions. So the Kohen who's tahor says, "Oh, wait, you want the portions? Come and sprinkle and offer the sacrifice. You can't because you're tevul yom. Then you don't get to eat. Yasa tevul yom. Kulav achamurav al rosho onen mimino mechusar kapara misemolo." This is the end of the long story. That this Tvul Yom, he leaves dejected, he gets nothing, and he has his kal vachomers on his head, meaning he tried to bring all the kal vachomers he wanted to. He had all these counter kal vachomers, but they didn't help him. He has to carry him back on his head, and he gets nothing. He gets no food, and the onen is on his right, mechusar kapara is on his left. In other words, we in the story we gave the example of someone who's Tvul Yom, but you could have given the same story with an onen. He could also come in with the same claims, counterclaims, and mechusar kapara also, and so the same pesukim that would deny the Tevul Yom, deny them as well. And so you see, from this story, it's good to put it in the story, because when you put it in the story, you see the rights that each one is bringing, and they can claim a kal vachomer. My power is greater, my power is greater. And through that, we appreciate the need for these three pesukim. Now a question on this baraita. Parik Rav Achai lema le ten li mibechor ve'ochal. Rav Achai says, how come Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, who taught this whole story, how come he didn't add yet a fourth dialogue regarding a bechor, that someone who's a Tvul Yom comes and says, hey, there's a bechor animal that you're sacrificing, and the Kohanim get the portion of a bechor animal. He says, I want a portion too, and I'll eat it later at night. So how come we didn't add this? Well, mishum da'amar le, uma b'makom shehura kochi bechatat etzel nashai v'abadai, dechiticha mechatat Israel, makom sheyafe kochi bebchor, dekule dilihi, enodin she'adi chacham mimenu. Now, what would the tahor Kohen say? He would say as follows: if in a case where I have less power, and that's a chatat regarding my wives, the Kohen who's offering, the tahor Kohen who's offering a korban chatat, he gets the portion of the chatat, but he cannot share it with his wives and his slaves. And so there, I have less power over it, and yet I pushed you away from a chatat of a Yisrael, that you cannot have any at all. That was the case we saw above. So in a case where I have greater power, the Tahor Kohen says, I have more access to a Bechor, where I can take the whole thing and I can share it with my wives and my family, whatever I want. So since I have more rights over a Bechor, all the more so I have a right to push you out. It's kind of treating the laws of Kodashim kind of like monetary laws. That's why we're saying I have a bigger right to this, so I can deny you. That is the kal vachomer that the Kohen could say. However, in this case also, the Tevul Yom could answer back and say, Uma im dechitani mechatat shekeshem shura kochacha kach ura kochi tedicheni mebechor shekem sheyafe kochacha kach yafe kochi. Well, yes, you did reject me from sharing in the korban chatat because I'm a Tevul Yom. Because in that case, just like your access to it is less, so too my access is less. Maybe that's why you could reject me, because I have less access to a korban chatat in general, because I can't share it with my wife and my household. But but you cannot apply that to a bechor, where just like your access to a bechor is greater, so too is mine. So I have more of a claim to a bechor, and therefore you have to give me a portion. Harehu omer et damam tizrok al hamizbeach ve'et chelbam taktir ubsaram yelach bozerok ve'echol. And then the tahor kohen would have to quote the pasuk that says regarding a bechor. You shall sprinkle their blood on the altar and shall make their fat smoke for an offering, a pleasing aroma, and the flesh of them shall be yours. B'saram lecha yelach. If you can come and sprinkle the blood, then you can, then you can eat it. But you can't sprinkle the blood because of Tvul Yom. So you see that this example of Bechor fits into the model of the first three. So how come that Rabbi Elazar did not include this example as well? Ve'idach parich, and the answer is that the other kohen can say, Mi ketib ubsaram la kohen hazorek ubsaram yelach ketib vafilu le kohen acher. The Tvul Yom could reject this pasuk because the pasuk doesn't say that the flesh will go to the kohen who sprinkles the blood. It only says the flesh will be yours. Yours means kohanim. Any kohen, even a different kohen. So unlike the first three pisukim, those were clearer pisukim. It said that the flesh goes to the one who offers it, only him and not other kohanim. But in the case of Bechor, the pasuk itself is more ambiguous, just says you will have it. So since the pasuk is not as clear in this case as a refutation of the Kal Vachomer, that's why Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, did not include this exchange in his story. Finally, we ask, Vehechi abid hachi, how could he teach this thing in the bathroom? Ve'amar bar Chana, amar Rabbi Yochanan, b'chol makom mutar leharher, chutz me'merchas u'mibet hakiseh. Rabbi bar Chana said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, you're allowed to think about Torah everywhere, but not in the bathroom. So obviously he didn't teach it in the bathroom, but he thought about it in the bathroom and then came out and taught it to his students. But how could he even think about it in the bathroom? You're not allowed. And the answer is Leon so Shaneh. If it's involuntary, it's different. If you can control your thoughts, you go in the bathroom, okay, don't think about Torah, think about something else. But he was so preoccupied with this that he couldn't help himself, and he had the idea in the bathroom. What could he do? So that's why it's mentioning that he had to think about it in the bathroom. But luckily, he did think about it, and that way he was able to share it, and we were able to get the benefit of learning it. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.